Imagine a king crowned in glory, adored by his people standing at the peak of power, only to be torn apart limb by limb in front of a screaming crowd. Not for a crime of passion, not for madness, but for a betrayal so vile it shook the foundations of a kingdom. What could drive a man to such a horrific end? How does a ruler once loved become the villain in his own story? Stay with me, because the tale of King Aldric of Valthorne is one you won't believe. And it's a story that changed a nation forever. Let's step back to the year 1327 in the fictional kingdom of Valthorne, nestled in the rugged hills of what we might imagine as medieval northern Europe. Think of a land where stone castles loom over misty valleys, where knights clash in tournaments, and where loyalty to the crown is everything. Aldric was no ordinary king. Born to a humble noble family, he wasn't destined for the throne. His father, a minor lord, died in a skirmish when Aldric was just a boy, leaving him to scrape by in a world that valued bloodlines over ambition. But Aldric had something others didn't. A mind sharper than any blade, and a charm that could sway even the most skeptical lords. By his early 20s, Aldric had risen through the ranks, not by birthright, but by sheer will. He won the favor of King Edmund, Valthorne's aging ruler, who had no heirs. Edmund saw in Aldric a son he never had, a leader who could unite the fractured nobles and fend off rival kingdoms. When Edmund died, he named Aldric his successor, a decision that shocked the court. A low-born king. Unheard of. Yet, Aldric's coronation was a spectacle of hope. The people cheered as he vowed to protect Valthorne, to bring peace, and to honor the old ways. For a moment it seemed he could do no wrong. But power has a way of revealing who you really are. Aldric's early years as king were golden. He brokered peace with neighboring realms, rebuilt crumbling fortresses, and hosted lavish feasts that drew bards from across the continent. His court was a dazzling blend of old nobility and new blood, merchants, scholars, even a few reformed outlaws he'd pardoned. He married Lady Alara, a noblewoman whose beauty was matched only by her wit, and their union seemed to promise a dynasty that would last centuries. To the people, Aldric was a hero, a man who'd climbed from nothing to everything. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The old nobles, those born with silver spoons and ancient titles, never fully accepted Aldric. They whispered behind his back, calling him an upstart, a pretender. "He's no true king," they'd mutter in their candle-lit halls. Aldric heard the whispers and they gnawed at him. He began to see enemies everywhere, among his advisors, his knights, even his friends. His charm turned to suspicion, his generosity to paranoia. He started demanding loyalty oaths, not just from lords but from commoners too. Taxes soared to fund his growing army, and dissenters vanished into the dungeons beneath Valthorne's capital. Now let's pause for a second. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to feel that slow, creeping doubt? That's what Aldric's people began to feel. The man who'd once walked among them, sharing bread with farmers, now rode through. The streets flanked by grim-faced guards. His speeches, once inspiring, became laced with warnings. Betray me and you betray Valthorne. The kingdom's unity, which Aldric had worked so hard to build, started to fray. And that's when the first spark of treason ignited, not from the nobles but from Aldric himself. It began with a letter, intercepted by a loyalist spy in 1332. The letter was written in Aldric's hand, addressed to King Harold of Dregenheim, Valthorne's fiercest rival. In it, Aldric offered to cede Valthorne's northern territories, rich with iron mines, in exchange for Harold's support in crushing a supposed rebellion among his own nobles. The letter promised more. Aldric would open Valthorne's gates to Drakenheim's army, allowing Harold to claim half the kingdom as a protectorate. In return, Aldric asked for gold, troops, and a guarantee of his throne. It was a deal that would sell out his people, his legacy, and everything he'd sworn to protect. The spy who found the letter, a young woman named Isolde, didn't hesitate. She rode through the night, her horse nearly collapsing, to deliver it to Lord Cedric, one of the few nobles Aldric still trusted. Cedric, a grizzled warrior who'd fought beside Aldric in his early days, read the letter and wept. Not out of anger, but grief. He'd believed in Aldric, had staked his honor on him. Now he faced a choice: expose the king and risk civil war, or stay silent and let Valthorne fall to a foreign power. Cedric chose the harder path. He gathered the council of nobles, showed them the letter, and demanded Aldric's arrest. Word of the betrayal spread like wildfire. By dawn, the capital was in chaos. Crowds gathered outside the castle, shouting for answers. Aldric, unaware of the letter's discovery, appeared on the balcony, expecting to calm his people with another speech. But the crowd didn't cheer. They hurled stones, curses, and cries of "Traitor!" Aldric's guards dragged him back inside, but it was too late. The council, led by Cedric, stormed the throne room and placed him in chains. For the first time in his life, Aldric looked powerless, his crown askew, his eyes wide with fear. The trial was swift, but not without drama. Aldric didn't deny the letter. Instead, he claimed it was a ruse, a way to lure Harold into a trap. "I would never betray Valthorne," he insisted, his voice trembling. But the evidence was damning. The letter bore his seal, and a second message found in his chambers confirmed the deal. Witnesses, servants, scribes, even one of Aldric's own knights, testified to his secretive meetings with Drakenheim's envoys. The council deliberated for only a day before delivering their verdict: guilty of high treason. The punishment? Death by dismemberment, a rare and brutal sentence reserved for the worst betrayals. Now let's talk about what dismemberment meant in Valthorne. This wasn't a quick execution. It was a public spectacle designed to humiliate and terrify. The condemned would be bound to a wooden frame in the city square, their limbs tied to ropes. Executioners, often chosen from the king's own guard, would use blades to sever the body piece by piece, prolonging the agony as long as possible. The crowd would watch, some cheering, others weeping, as the traitor's life bled away. It was a punishment rooted in the old laws, meant to show that betraying the kingdom was worse than death itself. Aldric's execution was set for the first day of spring 1333, in the heart of Valthorne's capital. The square was packed: nobles, merchants, farmers, even children. Lady Alara, Aldric's wife, was forced to attend, her face pale but composed. She hadn't spoken to Aldric since his arrest, and rumors swirled that she'd known of his plans but stayed silent. As the sun rose, Aldric was led out in chains, his once fine robes replaced with a tattered tunic. He tried to speak, to plead his case one last time, but the crowd drowned him out with jeers. The executioners, 3 men in black hoods, stepped forward, their blades gleaming. The first cut was to his right arm. The blade bit deep, and Aldric's scream echoed across the square. Blood sprayed onto the cobblestones, and some in the crowd turned away, unable to watch. But others pressed closer, shouting for justice. The executioners worked methodically, moving to his left arm, then his legs. Aldric's cries grew weaker, his body slumping against the ropes. By the time the final blow came, he was barely conscious. The crowd fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of what they'd witnessed. Aldric, the king who'd promised them everything, was gone. But the story doesn't end there. Aldric's death didn't bring peace to Valthorne. The nobles, now leaderless, turned on each other, squabbling over the throne. Drakenheim, sensing weakness, invaded the northern territories Aldric had offered. And Valthorne's army, demoralized, struggled to hold them back. Lady Alara vanished from the capital, some say to a convent, others to a foreign court. The people, once united by Aldric's vision, grew bitter, their trust in rulers shattered. The kingdom he'd built began to crumble, its golden age reduced to a memory. So what can we take from this? Aldric's story isn't just a tale of betrayal, it's a warning. Power can corrupt even the best of us, turning heroes into villains. Aldric started as a man of the people, but his fear of losing control led him to betray everything he stood for. His end, gruesome as it was the consequence of choices he made long before the executioner's blade fell. It makes you wonder, how far would you go to hold on to what you've built? And what would you sacrifice to keep it? For us today, Aldric's tale resonates in a different way. We live in a world where trust is fragile, whether it's in leaders, institutions, or even each other. His story reminds us to question those we follow, to look beyond the charm and promises. It's a call to hold ourselves accountable too. Are we staying true to our values, or are we letting fear and ambition steer us off course? These are the questions that linger long after the crowd disperses and the square falls silent. If this story struck a chord with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, maybe share a time you felt betrayed or saw someone fall from grace. And if you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. We've got more tales of kings, rebels, and twists that'll keep you glued to your screen. Speaking of which, if you're curious about another shocking historical end, check out our next video. Anne of Cleves' final hours were terrifying. It's a story that'll make your skin crawl. Until then, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.